the various tangents and the various pitfalls in what you're thinking or what you're studying. The study of Torah is a very complex matter, especially if you go to the original sources. You have to first be able to interpret them, and after you interpret them, you have to get clearly what they're saying. Like today's Gemara, two innocuous statements by the rabbis, it turns out that they have a very, very deep disagreement on certain basic concepts of Eruvin. They're just, when you have, even if the rabbis seem to be saying the same thing, if you look at the language and you extrapolate from the language, you will see that they're different. Even though in general they say the same thing, but the specifics make for incredible, not just mental exercise, incredible aspects of incredible aspects of not just mental, but how to derive the halacha and the various components of the halacha. Are only able to do that if you are osik b'Torah. So if you can be osik b'Torah, you have a mind that's able to analyze, and you don't analyze, even though you're studying the Gemara, you're studying the Rashi, you're studying the Tosfos. You don't stop talking the Torah, but you can go and be osik. You can go and involve yourself and to go to plumb to the depths. That is what they're talking about. Shalom Dosha Razal. Upon such a person, the Razals say, our Rebbe say, Kidvar Hashem Boza, he has shamed the word of God. He kores to kores. This person shall have twice kores, twice soul extinction in this world and the next world. So if a person will get kores twice in this world and the next world, just for not learning properly, or not being sufficiently involved in learning, is a pshita certain the mikri Rasha Tfei Me'over is the Rabbanan. He's certainly a greater Rasha than somebody who goes against the rabbis. Yeah, he's chayiv misa, he's deserving of death, but you give him stripes, but you don't cause soul extinction in this world and in the next world. But for lack of study of Torah, you lose both worlds. V'im kain, if that's the case, al korcha chabeinani ein by afilu oven bittul Torah. The Beinani doesn't even have that in his resume of not learning Torah. And that's the reason, that's why Rabbah could make that mistake and say that he was an in-between, a tweener. Because the Beinani doesn't ever stop learning Torah, and that was what Rabbah was about. So here the Rebbe asked a question from the Zohar. This is found in the Zohar in the third chelik, which is Vayikra. Mashikosa b'zoy chelik gimel dafrei shlamid aleph. This is what it says in the Zohar. Page folio 231, Kol shememuatin avinosav. A tzaddik she'enoi gomer is somebody who has a few sins. So it would appear from the language of the Zohar that he interprets it different than the Rebbe's interpreting it from the Gemara, from the story of Rabbah. So the Rebbe says, no, that's not the conclusion of the Zohar. He sha'elas Rav Amnuna le'Eliyahu. This is only his a query from Eliyahu that maybe this might be this way. According to the response of Eliyahu there, Pirish Tzadik Viraloi, the translation, the meaning of Tzadik Viraloi, is that the Zohar says in Parshas Mishpatim that we mentioned before, the Tzadik Viraloi is a perfect person. He has it, but he has a Yetzer Hara. But it's under control. The Yetzer Hara is completely under the mastery of the Yetzer Tov. So what's the difference between a tzaddik v'ralo and a tzaddik v'tovlo? Tzaddik v'tovlo doesn't even have a Yetzer Hara at all. He has no connection to any material desires at all. Doesn't have that within his resume. The tzaddik v'ralo does, but he has it in complete control and mastery. As Meshivim Panim l'Torah, there are 70 faces of the Torah. Not that this is another way of interpreting it. The Rebbe says, Rav Amnuna thought that this was one of the 70 faces of Torah, one of the 70 ways of translating the Torah, and Eliyahu said, no, the 70 faces of Torah are within the pshat. You have to have a pshat, a simple meaning, and within the simple meaning, you have different perspectives. Every person has a different perspective. In fact, according to the Ari, there are 600,000 perspectives in Torah. Because even if we see things similarly, there's always going to be subtle differences. And so that potentially there's 600,000 different commentaries based upon the fact that there's 600,000 different souls. So now we go back. So we've come full circle. The Beinoni is a great person. That's why Rabbah could make the mistake that he was a Beinoni. And the Beinoni doesn't have any sins. So then we got to understand what's the difference between a Beinoni who doesn't have any sins and a tzaddik who doesn't have any sins. As far as we're concerned, that's a tzaddik. So he answers that you're right. In the way we look at things, the way we look at the actions of a person, the tzaddik and the Beinoni look exactly the same. They constantly are learning, they're constantly doing the right thing. The difference between them is that the tzaddik never is challenged by material things, by material desires. The Beinoni has to deal with his material desires. In other words, the Beinoni is a normal person with normal reactions. Tzaddik is not normal. What does it mean he's not normal? He's not regular. The tzaddik actually has to be created as a tzaddik. The capacity to be a tzaddik, the Rebbe will say, is something that is imbued within certain people, and the rest of the world will not become a tzaddik. Therefore, the person shouldn't strive to be a tzaddik. This person should strive to be a Beinoni. Look, we all have our jealousies, we all have our desires, we all have petty things that we get involved in our thought process. And a person can get very, very depressed if they're trying to be a holy person. And all of a sudden, hey, this guy's got a bigger piece of meat than I do. Or this guy's car is nicer than mine. Or this person's dira has another 10 meters than mine. And I pay the same amount. People are jealous of all kinds of things, or people get affected by all kinds of things. The Beinoni has normal reactions to things. The tzaddik will never get a reaction like that. And that's the difference between a tzaddik and a Beinoni. A Beinoni is a normal person, does the right thing all the time. A tzaddik also does the right thing all the time, but doesn't have the struggle that the Beinoni has. The tzaddik struggles are totally different. So there's a sefer that the Rebbe wrote called Sefer Shel Tzaddikim, and the Rebbe said he had to be gonazed, he had to hide it, because what he talked about there, if it became public, people would pursue it, and they might hurt themselves because they're not shaykhs to it. It's not something that they should aspire to. But there is a distinct level for the service of the tzaddik. So now we go back to the nomenclature, the normal way of translating things. We say normally the mechtzal mechtzah mikri bein. This is found in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. A person who is a wicked person that mostly has averos and a few mitzvahs is called a rasha, and he's nidan lemavis. He's judged for death. Person who has more mitzvahs than averos is called a tzaddik, and he's judged on Rosh Hashanah for good. Beinoni, he's half and half, and therefore we're going to suspend the issue of the Beinoni until Yom Kippur. We're going to see if he has mostly mitzvahs or not. This is what we usually say in Rosh Hashanah. So how does that coalesce or co-align with what Rabbah said about himself, that he was a Beinoni? So the Rebbe explains that this is called a loan name. What is it called? Not an adjective. There's a name. There's a name for it. He was a lion on the field. There's a word for that in English. I don't remember what to say. But I'm reading the Alma, this that we usually say, the mechtzal mikri bein, the half and half is called the Beinoni, v'rov zchuyos mikri tzaddik, and having more merits than negativity is called the tzaddik. We say this in Rosh Hashanah, Ushem Amushal. It's a lent name. It's a borrowed name. It's a descriptive name. There's a word for it. I forget what it is. Inyan Schavayonish, concerning reward and punishments. A person is judged by his majority. You look this in the Rambam. This is found in the Rambam, Perek Aleph and Perek Beis in Hilchos Tshuva. A person is judged by his majority. Umikri tzadik bedinoi. It is called tzadik in his judgment. Since he wins the court case, whether he should be living or not, because he is still is considered a tzaddik, he has been justified. He has been found correct in his din, but that doesn't make him a tzaddik. That means he's a tzaddik in his the judgment. Amita Shema Torah, according to the truth of the descriptive name, the what is it? Adjective, not adjective. The descriptive name. What's the descriptive name in English? I don't know. And the benefit shall milas madregas chalukas tzadikim b'meini, and the beneficial level, the different levels between tzadikim b'meinim. Omer Razal, the rabbis tell us tzadikim yetzer tov shoftim. Shenema v'libi chol b'kibi. The rabbis tell us that a tzaddik has only the yetzer tov that judges them in their heart. They don't have a yetzer hara at all. Their yetzer hara does not play at all in their decision making, because the only thing that they have to worry about is the yetzer tov, and whether they have the ability to do that. They have to judge whether they can do that or not. But my heart is empty within me. She'ein lo yetzer hara, he has no yetzer hara. Ki haraga b'tainis. David HaMelech killed his yetzer hara through fasting. Whoever has not reached this level, that his heart is empty for any kind of passion, material passion, even if his merits are much greater than his sins, he's not in the level, the beneficial area of a tzaddik at all, not even a tzaddik in action. And therefore, Amar Razal, the rabbis tell us in the Medrash, Roa Kodesh Baruch Hu b'tzadikim she'em mu'atim. God saw before him that the tzadikim would be very few. So what did God do? Amad v'shaslam b'chol dor v'dor. He went and he planted them in each generation. Every generation will have a tzaddik, as it says that there are 18,000 tzaddikim that stand before you. And God, what did God do? He put the 18,000 in each generation, a few of them, so that they should be meritorious for everybody else. As it says, the tzaddik is so olam, the tzaddik is the foundation of the universe. So there are different levels of tzaddikim, and even among tzaddikim, there is only one or two that are considered tzaddik yesod olam, the tzaddik, the foundation of the world, and that's a chad b'dor, a trei b'dor. That's what you have the discussion of Rab Shimon Bar Yochai said. If there are 1,000, then I and my son are among them. There are 100, I and my son among them. There are 10, I and my son among them. If they are 2, they are I and my son. So in other words, Rabbi Elazar ben Rab Shimon, who was criticized soundly by the rabbis in his time, nonetheless he was the tzaddik yesod el. He was a tzaddik, and he was the foundation of the world. The world got its life in his merits. So the tzaddik yesod elam is very rare. This is only for what is called a tzaddik gomer, a complete tzaddik. Other tzaddikim are not tzaddik yesod elam. They are tzaddikim, but they are not the foundation of the world. Or what is the purpose of the tzaddik? It's a totally different creature. The tzaddik is only worried about what God wants out of this world. What God will have out of this world. There's a very famous story of the Rebbe Rashab. He was the first president of the Kinus Oilami of the Aguda. This was when Reb Chaim was also involved. Reb Chaim Brisker was involved, and they were the co-presidents. So the Rebbe wanted to push something through, and he failed. So afterwards, he couldn't stop crying. So the Chafetz Chaim was there. He says, "Lubavitcher Rebbe, why are you crying? You did everything you could." He says, "What difference does it make if I did everything I could?" But God's will was not fulfilled. So the tzaddik has a totally different agenda. He's only interested in what is the will of God, to push through God's agenda. That's what the tzaddik is all about. We, on the other hand, we push through our own personal agenda. We worried about, our kids, worried about parnasa, we worried about this and that, but that's not what the tzaddik is all about. Tzaddik has a totally different perspective, and we can't go ahead and try to be that. You try to be that, and you don't have the capacity to be that, you wind up falling in your face. So now, once we understood the definitions, that a Beinoni is an in-between, and a tzaddik is something else other than a person who does good all the time. So now he has to clarify how that works. To clarify the thing. Be'er is different than Pirish. Pirish means I translate. Be'er means I clarified by bringing new points into the discussion. So the Rebbe is going to bring a completely new discussion that has roots in some of the writings of the Kabbalah. The Rambam completely rejects this approach. By the way, I'm going to tell you very clearly, the Rambam is much easier to find, much easier to deal with. The problem with the Rambam is if that's the case, why do I find things so difficult even after I've made the decision? So they have to explain that. Here, the Rebbe says, that based upon what Rav Chav says, Rav Chaim Vital says in Shara Kedusha, in the portal of Kedusha, in his writings, there are different sha'arim. There are 20 books that I have from the Arizal, and each one is called a shar. So the Shara Kedusha is a sefer. Just as there's a shar on Ruach HaKodesh, there's a sefer on Ruach HaKodesh. So in the Shara Kedusha, it's also found in the Eitz Chaim. The Eitz Chaim was a much more popular book. That's why he puts it in brackets, because that's easy to look up. Beis Chaim Shar Nun, Perek Beis, and in Shar Nun, the second chapter, he says, the L'chol Ish Yisrael. Notice the words, L'chol Ish Yisrael, every Jewish person. Echad Tzadik Vechad Rasha, whether it's a Tzadik or Rasha, Yeshtei Neshamas. They're two different souls. And he's going to explain that there's not two Neshamas per se. The Ksiv, as it's written, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu addressed Adam Rishon, Neshamas Ani Yosisi, I've made Neshamas by Adam. In the creation of Adam, I created Neshamas. Shehein, these are not what we commonly call Neshama, the holy Neshama. Shehein Shtei Nefashos. These are two different wills, two different spirits, two different wills, two different entities that have different wills. Nefesh Achas, one will, Mitzad HaKlipa B'Sitra Achra. So we have a will that comes from the side of Klipa. Klipa is that which is a shell that covers up ungodliness. Sitrach is the other side. Klipa is a shell that covers up ungodliness. Sitra Achra is the opposition. So there exists, because the reason is Klipa allows for Sitra Achra to exist. Sitra Achra is the other side, the negative side. Klipa is only a shell, a blockage, something that blocks light, and is not necessarily a side, as you'll soon see. So there's a nephesh that comes from Klipa and Sitra Achra. The he, and this nephesh is hamislabeshes b'dam adam, is engarbed in the blood of a person, la'achis aguf, to give life to the body. Could exceed, as it is written, ki nefesh habosa badomi. The will, or the nephesh, the spirit of the flesh, is found in the blood. Obviously, the neshama is not in the blood. When you give blood, you're not giving your neshama away. But the nephesh, the animal soul, is engarbed in the blood or in the material of the person. Yeah. And from this nephesh, from this spirit, that is from Klipa and Sidracha, boys kolamidis rois ma'abo yisoidis roim sheba. All of the different traits that are evil in a person come from the four evil elements that are found in the nephesh. And he gives examples. In other words, just as there is found Ofar and Mayim and Ruach and Eish in the world, corresponding to that in everything, in every material thing, and even every spiritual thing, corresponding to that, parallel to that, there exists dust and water and wind and fire. And this, in the animal soul, is Daled Yesod Yisrael, four evil elements within it. Why does he say it's evil? because whatever is not good is already evil. If it's not good, then it's evil. What is good? Good is selfless. Good is inclusive. Good is universal. Good is loving. Good is caring. Good is putting yourself aside. Evil is selfish, only for self. Sometimes you have to be selfish, but that's because you have an obligation of saving yourself. But that which is selfish is only for indulgence and for one's own pleasure. That is raw. That is evil. That's the evil part within us. And it's not good. It's not kedusha. Okay. So the Hainu, he gives an example. There's the element of fire. The Hainu kas v'gaiva, anger and arrogance comes from Yesod Eish, comes from the element of fire. Shenigba l'mayla. What does arrogance have to do with fire? Fire seems to be intense and burning. And where's the burning here? The answer is fire goes and lifts itself up. So arrogance lifts itself up. That comes from the element of Eish. It may not be burning and raging. The person could be quiet and arrogant, but arrogance picks itself up higher than other people, and that's the element of Eish, which lifts itself up above. Then there's Taivas v'tanugim, there's desires and pleasures. This comes from Yesod HaMayim, this comes from the element of water. Ki hamayim matzmichim kol mini tainik, because water is the source. They give rise to all kinds of pleasures. All the pleasures that we find in the human being come from a transfer of some kind of a liquid from one place to another. So the element of pleasure is the inyan of mayim. Mayim is the element that gives rise to indulgences and pleasures. The hailulus is just making, jokes. Nahulus means boisterousness, and litzonis is mocking things. The spirus and showing off, advarim b'teilim, and just empty words, empty conversations. It comes from Yesod HaRuach, the element of wind. Wind has no substance. It just goes from place. There's no real basis for it. The difference between a Baal Gaiva and a show-off is the show-off has nothing to really pride himself in. So he tries to find something to show off. So he wears flashy clothes, he drives a fancy car, but he's got nothing to really show off. When a person's a Baal Gaiva, there's a reason why he's a Baal Gaiva. He's smart, he's cunning, he's good looking, he's strong. There's some reason for it. That's the Gaiva. The Gaiva has a source. Wind goes from side to side, it has no basis. So it moves from side to side, but it doesn't really go above because it really doesn't have something behind it. Then the worst of it all is atzlus v'atzvus. Laziness and sadness comes when you say to offer the element of dust, because when a person is sad, he can't do anything good. And what gets the person to do good? Excitement about you're doing something good, they're doing something important. So when you're excited about it, you want to do it again, you want to do it faster, you want to get more people involved. But when you're down and in the dumps and sad, you can't do anything, not for yourself, not for anyone else. You know you have to do something for your community, you know you have to do something to make sure that things are working well. When you're in a state of atzvus, a sadness, that doesn't allow you to do anything that's proper. I was told this by the Rebbe about my issues. One of the things the Rebbe told me that I get, question myself and question things and go over things and not confident about what to do. This disease of uncertainty, he says, that doesn't allow you clarity in halacha, clarity in the study of Torah. And I can tell you that from that time on, it took me 40 years to be able to accept what the Rebbe said to me. This has helped me immensely in the clarity of my thought. I no longer think muddled things. I try to think things very clearly, because when you have muddled thought, that comes from atzlus and atzlus, sadness. And the person doesn't know, and he's afraid to go ahead and make decisions and afraid to go ahead and think things out clearly. This is atzvus and atzlus. And then he says, "V'gamidas toivus," even good qualities. Shebeteva kol Yisrael b'Tolosah is found in the nature of every Jew, and is found in the nature of a Jew by birth. Just as compassion and being kind, acting kind to other people. Which, you see this when David HaMelech said that the Givonim cannot be part of Klal Yisrael because they're orally lave, they have no Rachmanis, they have no compassion. That's a sign of being a Jew. That's not even an element of the neshama. That's an element of the animal soul of a Jew. This comes from the animal soul. Kibi Yisrael nephesh zu de klipa. By Jews, this soul of klipa, himi klipas noga, comes from the klipa, which is called noga, which is Venus. That's a klipa. That's a shell sheyesh ba gam kein tov, that has some good mixed in with it. V'misoda eitz hadas tovara. This is from the secret of the eitz hadas, the tree of knowledge that has good and evil mixed within it. So the animal soul of a Jew is different, he's going to say, than the animal soul of Nishtayid, because a Nishtayid doesn't have any tov at all. This is a very, very hard statement. It's a very harsh statement. So there is, in the annals of Chassidus, and especially in the writings of Hillel Parachah, that the Chassidi Umas Ha'elam are able to get themselves to the point where they have a balance between good and evil. They do have some good in themselves, and this becomes part of their repertoire. But in general, a person who does not seek out to do God's will from the Umas Ha'elam generally only sees selfishness. Now, selfishness doesn't appear to be bad, but the point is selfishness, when taken to its ultimate extreme, can become murder and can become other kinds of things that you see in the general world. The Teva, we are Rachmanim and Gomli Chasadim, we are very, very poor occupiers of other people's lands. We're very, very poor masters of others, because we have Rachmanis and Gemilas Chasadim as our nature, and we're not Rishoyim, we're not wicked and cruel as a matter of our nature. Mashenkin, the Fashas Umaselim, the souls of those who nations of the world, and he has it as those who worship idols, but Mizumaselim. Hey, Mishar Klippas may come from other impure Klippas. Shemem Tov Klal, they have no good at all. So how do they have no good at all? They have no good. Those who are truly want to be servants of God, they do merit to have, like the nephesh abamis of a Jew. But somebody doesn't want to worship God at all. He just goes by what makes them feel good. Then that person has no good at all. That any good that they do only do for themselves, only interested in the pearly gates. It says in the Gemara, the kindness of the nations is a sin. How can you say it's a sin when they're doing kindness? He explains, they only do kindness and tzedakah in order to show off. See what I do. But to do it because it's the right thing to do, that motivation is lacking. Unless they want to worship God and want to do what's right in front of God's eyes, then they can have this idea that you do the right thing, not because you're going to be honored by others, but because it's the right thing to do. There are very few who do that, but there are people who do, and they have they've reached the level called nephesh abamis of a body Yisrael, that the Jew does it b'teva, by his nature, because that's what you're supposed to do. We have in our animal soul b'teva to be kind and compassionate, but that's not avodas Hashem. That's not the neshama. The neshama is totally different. We do it because we feel hurt. We feel, what if I was like that? By the neshama, does it because it's the right thing to do, because that's what God wants us to do. It's not because what would happen if me. It's not a reflection of yourself. Even if it did happen, or even if it couldn't happen, doesn't make a difference. We still have to do it because God wants us to do it. And that's a different kind of Rahmanis, a different kind of tzedakah that comes from the Neshama. So to recapitulate, A tzaddik is a different creature. That which somebody is called a tzaddik, that's only because he's judged between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, judged if they're righteous or not, to merit to have another year. But a real tzaddik is somebody that has no Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara is in complete control. And in fact, the different levels of tzaddikim until we get to the level of tzaddik Yisrael Eilam, which is 1 or 2 in a generation. The Beinoni acts as a tzaddik does, but the Beinoni is different. He has an animal soul, has to deal with the animal soul. And in fact, it's possible for a person to be a Rasha and then become a Beinoni. When a person goes through the process of tshuva, the person becomes a Beinoni at that point. He's a tzaddik gomer in his judgment, but he's only a Beinoni in the sense that he has a balance. He has good and evil as a balance within his will. When a person goes ahead and continues to do the wrong thing, like a person who goes ahead and takes drugs, after a while you cannot say no to them because you're used to them. The ability of a person to say no to the Yetzer Hara requires the person to be able to say, the more we give into our Yetzer Hara, the harder it is for us to get out of it. Because we did it once, did it second, did it third. It's in second nature now. You know, a person is not careful. I use Yetzer Hara because it's the most popular thing to use, but the truth is it's anything. A person overeats, or a person eats something that really is not so kosher, or a person goes ahead and sees things that are not so kosher. The person didn't just start there. The person started saying, giving himself a tear for other things. And then this person starts doing things that are less kosher, less, till the person finally does things that he knows are prohibited. And he does it once, twice, 3, 4 times, and it becomes secondhand. He doesn't realize that he's doing it. He has no busha that he's doing it. Yeah, I was once at a bar mitzvah, and I was sitting in the back. These 2 guys were talking throughout the entire Kriyas Torah, and they know it's wrong. But it was Veschanan, and you had to stand for the Aseres Adibris. I thought I'll be able to hear the Aseres Adibris. No, they kept on talking on the stocks that they were talking between them. They didn't stop. They just were standing because everyone else was standing. They could not stop talking if somebody asked them to stop talking. Because when a person goes ahead and does it again and again and again, he loses. That's what a Beinoni is. A Beinoni is able to say no or yes, depending upon the situation. That's what a Beinoni really is. A Beinoni is a normal person that can say yes or no for anything. And that's a normal person. Any person who's a normal person that is not completely drugged and completely given over to anything has the ability to always choose the right thing. That's a Beinoni. So, well, but I'm not. I don't daven prava. So when you do tshuva, you're back to being a Beinoni. All right, to be continued, chapter 2 about the tzaddik, about the nephesh elokis. Okay. I'll catch up with you next week, all right?
Okay.
You have any questions? You should have stopped me. I kept talking. No? It's all clear.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have trouble with the idea of the comment about the Goyim. There are Goyim who
You're not
do...
the only one, so am I.
There are Goyim who do wonderful things, and
so that's
but you made the distinction, or the Rebbe makes the distinction that the person is doing it when he's doing it for God's will, then it's okay. There could be Jews who do this also. They, do lots of things to show off and say, look, I built this building, whatever.
So the Rebbe is saying we have a nature to do it. Sometimes you have to appeal to the person's Yetzer Hara to do something good. But the truth is that we as a group will do things because it's the right thing to do, even if it's not to our benefit. There are many things that we do in our own lifetime, so we do as a matter of course, even if it won't help us, and in fact, it will hurt us. But we have to do it. It's the right thing to do. When a person is motivated only for their own benefit, if he's going to lose something from it, he won't do it. And in order to, the comment about a goy is very difficult. And this is one of the This was one of the challenges that the Alter Rebbe had from the Tsar's minister of religion. And the Rebbe didn't answer. The Rebbe just smiled because he didn't want to have to get into it. But that's his position. The Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe didn't change his position. He's saying that somebody comes from Klippas does not have good as pure good. He has it first for motivation of self. And that's not considered good. Mother Teresa, she meant it seriously. She didn't do it because maybe she did it for the pearly gates, but there are people in this world who do things for the good, but they have to work at it and they have to want to serve God. And when they do, then they merit this level that a Jew has b'teva, that a Jew does things for the sake of God, not for their own personal gain. And that's a nature that the Jews have, and it's not necessarily natural by other people. That's what he says. The Rambam has a totally different take on this, but it's I'll talk about it next time. But the Rambam's take on it is a totally different one. The Rebbe's take obviously is taken from the verses and from the psukim, but mostly from the Eitz Chaim, from the writings of the Ari. And I can only tell you that once in my life I did experience something close to this, but I cannot comment one way or the other. This is the Rebbe's position, and it makes sense. The reason why even if you reject this, even you don't reject the fact that a person has two souls, a nephesh habam and a nefesh, explains why it's so difficult to make decisions and to carry them out. You wanted to do this, and yet when it comes to the pole, you get resistance. Where's that resistance coming from? The answer is two different nefashos. One nefesh is the nefesh alakis, which we'll study about next time. The other is the nefesh habamis that that's the animal soul, and that says, wait a second, I don't agree. You want to do it, that's your opinion, but I want to live and I want to enjoy my life. What are you doing? You're making it difficult. So that makes more sense in terms of why we have this struggle against our inner motives. We have this struggle all the time. Why, after a person wants to be totally pure, why we get confronted from desires and things that are extraneous, this explains it much, much clearer. And that's why a person should strive to be a Beinoni, not to try to change themselves into not having any desires or not having any motives, not wanting any covet. We can't get out of those things because we are animals. Our body is an animal. It is the nefesh elokis that's godly. And we can't divorce ourselves from material interests. And that was something that in the time of the Rebbe, that gnawed every single Oved Hashem. Any person that tried to study Torah, try to be good, was totally overwhelmed by it. How could, I'm back where it's square one. No, you're not. You're just debating it. That's not square one. That's who you are. You're trying to become a tzaddik. That's not your league. Those are the big leagues. Those are not even the big leagues. They exist in Gan Eden. It's not something that a person should do, should want to have. So this was the Rebbe's approach. It's in contradiction to other Hasidic Rebbes. Reb Nachman Bresler says, for example, you can be a tzaddik. The problem with that is that the tzaddik then would have no ulterior motives, and then the physical motives of the tzaddik would have to be divinely inspired, and that can reach levels of abuse like you wouldn't believe. There's a certain guy that I held of, Bresler Chassid, totally whacked out and brought before court and embarrassed, and he admitted it. How does he make that mistake? He thought he was a tzaddik. He thought his motive for little children was coming from God. Didn't realize that who he was and what he was. Okay, talk about it another time. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Zaygebench. Yeah, we'll talk next Wednesday.